Imagine being handed the exact coordinates of something hidden in the Amazon rainforest. Maybe it is a strange shape detected from the air. You have GPS, drones, modern medicine, and a serious expedition. On paper, this should be easy. Surely we can walk to one point inside a forest. But that is where the Amazon plays a trick on us. The problem is not that the Amazon is completely unexplored. It isn't. Indigenous peoples have lived across Amazonia for thousands of years, researchers work there today, satellites monitor it, and boats travel its rivers. The real mystery is why huge regions still have not been systematically examined on the ground by modern science. Why can we detect things from the sky that remain difficult to investigate below the trees? And why does knowing exactly where something is not mean you can easily reach it? Start with scale. The Amazon biome covers roughly 6.7 million square kilometers. It is a continental maze of upland forest, floodplain, swamp, wetlands, and immense stretches between major rivers. A recent mapping study estimated average canopy height at roughly 22 meters. From space, it can look like one smooth green surface. On the ground, it is three-dimensional chaos. And this is the first reason exploration becomes difficult. A straight line on a satellite image may cross an unbridged river, flooded forest, ravines, mud, or tangled understory. In many intact regions, rivers become the natural transport network. But rivers only solve the problem if your destination is near a navigable channel. Move between major rivers and food, medical supplies, batteries, and sampling gear have to move with people. And this is where one of the biggest myths about the Amazon begins. GPS does not simply shut off the moment you walk beneath the canopy. Modern GNSS receivers can work under trees. But dense vegetation changes the quality of the signal. Leaves, branches, trunks, moisture, and limited views of the sky can weaken or scatter satellite signals. Reflected signals create something called multipath error, where your receiver is effectively trying to calculate its position from signals that have taken different routes to reach it. The result? Your position can become slower, noisier, and less reliable precisely when accurate navigation matters most. The forest does not erase the satellites, it makes the connection messy. Research on navigation beneath dense forest confirms that canopy can significantly degrade satellite positioning, although specialized equipment and longer measurements can still obtain accurate results. The same distinction matters with drones. Drones are incredibly useful above the Amazon. Below the canopy? That becomes a completely different engineering problem. There are branches, hanging vegetation, poor satellite reception, repeated visual patterns, and limited communications. Researchers have developed autonomous systems for GPS-denied search and mapping under forest canopies because many of the assumptions that work in open terrain begin falling apart beneath dense trees. A drone may help you scout an opening. It does not turn hundreds of kilometers of rainforest into a road. And then the ground itself changes. Large parts of Amazonia are controlled by an enormous seasonal pulse of water. In major floodplain forests, wet season water can rise by several meters. Some Amazonian floodplain systems experience seasonal rises of roughly 7.5 to 15 meters. Think about that. A forest you could walk through during one part of the year can become an aquatic landscape during another. The trees are still there. The vines are still there. But now the ground beneath them has disappeared under meters of water. So a route that looked possible when you planned an expedition may become almost useless when you actually arrive. Fine. You wait for lower water. Now the problem becomes distance. In a city, 10 kilometers is nothing. In dense tropical forest, 10 kilometers can contain hundreds of tiny decisions. Cross here or search upstream? Cut through the vegetation or detour? Is that dark patch firm ground, mud, or water? Every detour makes your straight line longer. Every river crossing introduces another risk. And unlike a marked hiking trail, an expedition route may be difficult to recognize on the return journey. The forest does not regenerate a mature canopy in 3 days, as some dramatic stories suggest. But a lightly cut route can quickly become confusing as vegetation shifts, rain changes the ground, debris falls, and landmarks begin looking almost identical. And this is the Amazon's real superpower. It turns tiny problems into logistical problems. A blister or wet boot is not dramatic. Neither is a damaged battery. A small cut. A fever. Contaminated water. A twisted ankle. One by itself might mean almost nothing. But stack several of them together when the nearest road or medical facility is far away, and suddenly the entire expedition changes. Parts of tropical South America also have genuine malaria and yellow fever risks, which is why health authorities recommend specific vaccinations and malaria precautions for travelers entering particular regions of Brazil, Peru, and neighboring Amazonian areas. The point isn't that every insect is trying to kill you. The point is that an ordinary medical problem becomes a much bigger problem when treatment is nowhere nearby. And that brings us to the hidden equation behind almost every serious expedition. Imagine a researcher breaks a leg beneath closed canopy. You know the coordinates. Perfect. So send a helicopter. Except a helicopter still needs a safe way to reach the patient. The crew may not be able to land, and the canopy can hide people from direct view. The injured person may first need to be carried to a river or clearing. Suddenly, reaching the destination was never the hardest part. Getting someone back out is. That means a professional expedition cannot be designed only around the question, can we reach this location? It also has to answer, if someone becomes seriously injured here, can we evacuate them? And that completely changes which places are practical to visit. Now imagine unlimited money. Surely that fixes everything. Build roads. Cut paths. Clear helicopter landing zones. Establish fuel caches. Build bridges. Technically, humanity can force access into many difficult places. But there is a catch. The moment you begin doing that, you are no longer simply exploring the rainforest. You are changing it. Infrastructure can fragment habitats and make future exploitation easier. The very thing that makes wilderness easier to reach can also make wilderness easier to destroy. Which brings us to an obstacle that no chainsaw, satellite, drone, or helicopter is supposed to defeat. Some remote parts of Amazonia are home to indigenous peoples who choose to remain isolated from wider society. Brazil's FUNAI describes isolated indigenous peoples as groups that have not established permanent contact with the surrounding national population. And Brazil's protection system specifically prohibits attempts to initiate contact with isolated peoples in protected situations. That is not a failure of technology. It is a deliberate boundary. Because what looks like an empty green space on an outsider's satellite map may not be empty at all. It may be someone else's territory. Someone else's home. Someone else's history. Contact can also bring disease and disruption to communities living in extreme isolation, which is one reason Brazilian policy emphasizes their physical and cultural vulnerability and the protection of their autonomy. So one of the strangest answers to the question, why haven't we explored every part of the Amazon? Is because in some places, we shouldn't. But now the story becomes even stranger. Because while our ability to physically inspect every patch of rainforest remains limited, our ability to see through it is becoming extraordinary. And this is where LiDAR enters the story. LiDAR sends enormous numbers of laser pulses toward the landscape from an aircraft. Many pulses hit leaves and branches. But enough reach gaps in the vegetation and reflect from the ground that computers can reconstruct the shape of the terrain underneath the canopy. Basically, researchers can digitally remove the forest. And when they started doing this in Amazonia, they found something extraordinary. In 2022, researchers reported LiDAR evidence for major Caçarabe settlement centers and infrastructure in southwestern Amazonia, including large sites within a complex settlement system. Then, in 2024, researchers revealed a remarkable network of ancient settlements in Ecuador's upper Amazon. Platforms, roads, agricultural areas, organized settlement networks. Some with origins going back roughly 2,500 years. And then came an even newer discovery. In 2026, researchers publishing in Nature used Canopy penetrating LiDAR to dramatically expand evidence of pre-colonial earthworks in southwestern Amazonia. Their results suggested that more than 20,000 ancient earthworks may exist across the wider region being studied. Now stop and think about what that actually means. For centuries, people could travel through parts of these landscapes without understanding the enormous patterns hidden beneath the vegetation. Because when you are standing on the ground, an ancient earthwork may not look like an ancient structure. It may just look like a hill, a ditch, a slightly unusual slope covered in trees. But viewed from above with millions of laser measurements, suddenly the geometry appears. Technology has not made field exploration obsolete. It has actually created another problem. It has given us a longer list of places worth investigating. Because a LiDAR image is not an excavation. A laser map can show you a platform, a road, a ditch, a mound, a giant geometric enclosure. But it cannot automatically tell you who built it, exactly when they built it, why they built it, what happened there, or why it was eventually abandoned. Archaeologists still need field evidence, dating, artifacts, permission, and collaboration with communities connected to the landscape. Remote sensing can reveal the question. Ground science is still needed for the answer. And biologists face exactly the same problem. You cannot inventory millions of square kilometers by walking every hectare. Instead, scientists use research plots, cameras, acoustic recorders, DNA, remote sensing, local knowledge, and carefully targeted expeditions. This is what modern exploration of the Amazon actually looks like. Not one heroic explorer with a machete walking blindly through an enormous green void, but thousands of carefully selected windows into an ecosystem far too large to inspect continuously. And that completely changes what the word unexplored actually means. There probably isn't some gigantic, country-sized section of the Amazon that no human being has ever entered. Claims like that are almost impossible to prove. And more importantly, they erase thousands of years of indigenous presence. But there are enormous regions that remain poorly sampled by particular branches of modern science. There are species distributions we still don't fully understand. Archaeological features still hidden beneath forest. And remote regions where access is intentionally restricted. So why can't we truly explore the deep Amazon? Not because GPS instantly dies beneath a tree. Not because jaguars patrol the jungle hunting human expeditions. And not because there is some magical wall of vines that modern technology cannot cross. It is because reaching one location and systematically exploring a continent-sized ecosystem are two completely different things. To truly explore the Amazon would mean moving people and equipment through millions of square kilometers of changing terrain, maintaining navigation and communications, handling floods and disease risk, planning evacuations with almost no infrastructure, returning again and again to collect meaningful scientific evidence, and doing all of that without damaging the environment or violating the rights of people who already live there. We can photograph the canopy from orbit. We can measure forests from space. We can scan ancient landscapes with lasers. We can place an exact coordinate on a digital map. And yet there can still be an enormous difference between seeing a point on a screen and actually standing on the ground beneath it. Maybe that is what makes the Amazon so fascinating. We live in an age where we tend to assume that if something has been mapped, humanity somehow possesses it. But the Amazon reminds us that knowledge has layers. A satellite can know the shape of the forest. LiDAR can reveal the shape of the ground. A biologist can spend years understanding one tiny research plot. And an indigenous community may understand a river, a season, or a landscape in ways no satellite ever will. The Amazon is not a blank space waiting for humanity to conquer it. It is something far more interesting.